Hello again. Welcome to the Sunday Politics in the Midlands. What do Nuneaton and Bedworth, Staffordshire Moorlands, Stoke-on-Trent, Warwickshire and Wychavon have in common? They all have women council leaders, but that's just 5 out of our 38 local authorities, below the national average. Why do so few women make it to the top in the Town Hall, County Hall and the Council House, and what, if anything, should be done about it? Preet Gill is the Labour MP for Birmingham Edgbaston. She's a shadow International Development Minister. Andrew Griffiths is the Conservative MP for Burton, and he is a Business Minister. Very good to have you both with us here today. And a little bit later on, we'll ask what lies behind Jaguar Land Rover's decision to switch production of their Discovery model from Solihull to Slovakia. But we begin, not for the first time, with the often disgusting abuse directed at politicians online. The Labour MP for Birmingham Yardley, Jess Phillips, tells us that one night she received 600 rape threats. She's threatened with violence every day. Last Monday, she tweeted that her office had been vandalised for the second time in 2 years. So she wants people to be required to disclose their true identities to providers like Facebook and Twitter. Well, one of her parliamentary colleagues who's been on the receiving end of anti-Semitic abuse is also taking up the cudgels against the social media trolls.
We've got to be really clear about the type of country we want to live in now. The things that we say to each other on social media, we would never, ever say to someone's face. And it is extraordinary to me that these things have become acceptable to say online, just because you're never going to have any pushback from it. I think, there is literally, we have to go back to basics about how we respect each other.
Ruth Smith, and of course, Preet, you've just celebrated 1 year actually of becoming a Member of Parliament. Have you encountered this sort of thing yourself?
Yes, most definitely I have, and my response to it is actually that I will block people. I mean, there was a recent survey done over a 3-month period looking at the abuse that women faced as MPs, and I think it reached something like 200,000 messages that they received.
Is it particularly women you feel who get the rough end of this?
I think so. I definitely think so. I mean, their evidence is out there. Diane Abbott is somebody that receives it on a weekly basis. Her office are talking about actually collecting the messages. They don't have to send them in on a daily basis, but actually on a weekly basis. I mean, that is, I don't feel, sitting on Home Affairs Select Committee, hearing from the big companies like Facebook and Twitter that they've actually done enough. They're too slow, and we need to unmask these identities.
You both have thousands of followers, in fact. I mean, have you encountered this sort of thing as a male MP and a minister, so therefore the profile that goes with that?
I have. Just a few months ago, my wife was pregnant, and some kind soul on Facebook said that they hoped our baby died and that they hoped my wife went through hell when she was giving birth. I think women, men, across all political parties are suffering in this way. As Ruth Smith says, the tone, the discourse that politics is undertaken in has changed dramatically, and we have to do something. First of all, the government, as you know, has asked the Law Commission to look at the sentences that can be handed down in relation to this kind of abuse. But secondly, there's a real need for the social media providers to step up and take their responsibility seriously.
Well, they say they're just the notice board, really. They're not legally responsible. Unlike broadcasters, we're responsible for everything that's said and any potential libel or whatever. Do you think that needs to change?
I do think it needs to change. These are huge companies making huge profits across the globe. They have a responsibility. That's why we're looking for a code of social media providers to be brought in later in the year.
So would you like to see the anonymous trolls unmasked briefly, if you would?
Absolutely, I would. And I think Amber Rudd has been, in her role previously, she was talking to the big social media companies, but there was almost this sort of sense of voluntarily asking them to do this. But actually, I think we need to legislate it.
Okay. Thank you for the moment. So could the abuse suffered particularly by female politicians be one reason why so few women make it to the top in our town halls, county halls and council houses? 100 years after the first women won the right to vote, it seems most local authorities here remain bastions of male supremacy, and it can turn very nasty indeed. Sophie Calvert begins her report with a particularly chilling example.
This bullet hole is from just one of the 2 shootings at the home of Councillor Anne Lucas, who was the first ever woman to be leader of Coventry City Council, a position she held for 3 years.
The glazier was quite busy because I've had the windows shot in a couple of times. You've been into the house, so you've seen the security cameras, the panic alarm, the letterbox safety feature, so that fire bombs and human faeces don't come bounding through.
So after shoring up defences on her home, is this all because she's a woman?
Of the abuse that I suffered, I don't know any of the male colleagues, I'll stand corrected, who have been told that they should be abducted, kidnapped, raped, tortured.
Do you think positive discrimination's the way forward?
Sadly, I do. And I say sadly because we shouldn't have to do it. I believe in this day and age where men and women should be equal partners, we shouldn't actually have these barriers.
All this comes 100 years after the battle for votes for women was partially won, a battle that in 1913 is said to have brought 2 suffragettes to an old grammar school in Kings Norton, intending to start a fire. They backed out, instead leaving a message on the blackboard saying they'd been charmed by the old world room.
And you can see why they made that decision. And you'd hope that they'd be pleased that in 2018 this building's still standing and that women now play an equal part in electing people to positions of power. They might not be happy that they aren't exactly equal in holding them, as just 1 in 3 local councillors are women.
Out of 38 of the local authorities in the Midlands, the role of leader is held by a woman in only 5, which works out as 13%.
The other thing you see with women is because they've got families, it's difficult.
There's been a historical change at Stoke-on-Trent City Council, where for the first time ever it has a female leader who's been in the job for a month.
Why are we any different? We've still got the same brain. Women are not stupid. We're not sometimes those bimbos that people try to put a label on us. We are people and we can do all this work.
If the new leader at Stoke needs a bit of advice, she can always look to Warwickshire County Council, which has had a woman at the helm for 5 years, who isn't sure about positive discrimination.
If we want to be equal, we should be equal. And equal means you get there on your own merit, and so does somebody else. You know, I wouldn't want to feel that it's just because on the day I was the woman and they needed a better gender balance.
So, steps are being made, but is it enough to appease those still campaigning for gender equality?
Sophie Calvert and the Local Government Association are setting up a task force to deal with this gender split, and they've asked Anne Lucas to join it. Well, we're also joined here today by Dr. Karin Bottom. She specialises in politics and public management at the University of Birmingham's Institute of Local Government Studies. That was a shocking insight there that Anne Lucas gave us. And it's not going to encourage more women to come into politics, actually. What do you make of that? I mean, how disturbing is it?
I think it's very disturbing, and I think that people watching the programme will also find it so.
She thinks it's because she's a woman, mainly. Is that right, do you think?
I think she is right. I mean, it's not to say that men don't get abuse, of course, but the point is that I think that the evidence demonstrates that women get it more so, and they quite often get it more so because they're women. So, like, it's kind of almost like a double whammy. They're going to be criticised for what they say, and they're going to be doubly criticised for it because they're a woman.
I was interested that she used the word sadly when she talked about the necessity for, you know, all-female shortlist, affirmative action and so on, which contrasts very sharply with this Izzy Sickham there, who feels very strongly that the fact that she's a woman should play no part in it. True equality means that everybody stands on their own 2 feet, and she feels that she has to get through just the same as men do. Where do you stand on that?
I think both women are right. It should be that there's an equal playing ground. It should be that when 2 people are standing for a position, they should be treated equally and considered as equal. But unfortunately, they're not. We don't have an equal playing ground at the moment, so therefore we do need the positive discrimination that's been talked about in order to make things equal, so women can be seen and have opportunities that actually they don't have.
Is this really about women, or is it something about politics, a sort of macho culture? I mean, it can be a pretty testosterone-fueled environment over the years. We've seen that certainly at Westminster. Is that the problem?
I think that is one of the problems, yes. I mean, there's research that's kind of spoken to women about whether they want to go into politics, and a lot of women have demonstrated a desire to go into it, but after watching council meetings and the kind of arguments and, like you say, testosterone-driven discussions that take place, they say it's not for them. So you know, there are a lot of a lot of examples why women would like to go into politics, but they don't actually feel it's for them a lot of the time.
For the moment, thank you. I mean, you Preet, are yourself a product of an all-women shortlist here in Edgbaston. What would you say to Izzy Seckham, who would feel that, you know, she feels that it oughtn't to have anything to do with it, the fact that you're a woman or a man, that you just stand on your own 2 feet?
Of course it should be like that, but the reality is that we're nowhere near that, and the Labour Party wouldn't have 45% of its PLP as women if it didn't have all women shortlist.
Although you could be depriving yourselves of male talent potentially, could you not?
Well, I don't know, because I think even as a Labour councillor, for example, I mean, Labour has got more female councillors, but actually we do need to sort of shift the balance, especially around cabinets. We need to see 50% women. We probably need to have mandatory reporting from leaders of the councils to say actually what they are doing to improve this.
I did mention the macho culture, which I'm sure you and I can both register, certainly have observed it over the years. Is that something to do with this, do you think?
Well, it is, but I'm proud to be from a party that not only had a woman leader, but has produced 2 women prime ministers.
Margaret Thatcher was no great feminist, though, was she?
Well, Theresa May certainly is, and has done a huge amount to try and modernise our party and encourage women to come forward. There was a discussion just about the need for women on the cabinet. We do need women in top positions. In my own council, 3 out of the 5 cabinet posts are women. Andy Street, just this week, the mayor of the West Midlands, came forward with a consultation, a document looking at equality and how we can get more women into top positions. The great thing is this is being discussed at the highest levels, and as a government we are absolutely focused on making sure that women reach their true potential, whether that's in politics or in the workplace.
But it seems to be, I mean, there are startlingly impressive examples. Just thinking off the top of my head, I've noted that Teresa Stewart was the first leader of Birmingham City Council, who was a woman. Betty Boothroyd, very distinguished Speaker of the House of Commons. Jackie Smith, Labour Home Secretary. Caroline Spellman. Karen Bradley has served as Tory cabinet ministers. But the problem is we produce these individuals, but fewer women than you might expect actually follow their leading examples. Isn't that part of the problem?
It is, yes. We just do not have the numbers, and while we, like you say, we can point to examples of great women leaders, but ultimately we need to see these women coming through all the time, and most importantly we need to nurture the women that are in positions at the moment so they stay in council and they get promoted and start to lead other councils.
We did hear, or I should maybe say overhear, Anne James there in Sophie's report talking about the family life, which I know there is a danger of stereotyping, which we have to be careful about, but frankly that for a lot of women is the reality, isn't it? That when you have families it restricts your political ambition.
It does, and there needs to be some flexibility. I mean, when I was a councillor, it was really great that the meetings were actually in the evening, but actually a lot of attitudes that you did get from men were very much so saying things like to me, oh, you don't need to worry about things like that because you've got your kids and you probably need to get home. Very kind of flippant comments, and we need to change these types of attitudes.
You've mentioned that you've just become the father of a baby daughter, but I mean the fact is that you're the one with the high-flying career and your wife is the one, and that is the nature of it, isn't it? That men generally, and I know there's a stereotype, but generally it's the men who keep the career going.
I think things are changing. If you look at the new intake of Parliament and even the 2015 intake, it changed dramatically, really. Great women who are managing to juggle those two things, the home life and the work life. But you do get these barriers, whether it's in politics or whether it's the excuses we heard the other day for the reasons why women weren't in the boardroom of our biggest companies. And we have to challenge those. We have to say it's not acceptable. Women have got to have equality. Final
quick thought. I mentioned that there's a task force by the Local Government Association looking into this, Karen. What do you hope for, expect from them?
What I would hope for are clear and strong recommendations about how councils can really tackle this from the top and from the bottom. Because the most important thing I think that is recommended, really what we need is a change of culture a lot of the time.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
We'll see if it develops. Particular thanks to you, Karen,
Thank
for being
you.
with us here today. Well, now, we had been warned, hadn't we? The driving force behind our resurgent motor industry, Jaguar Land Rover, are worried sick about their European markets and suppliers post-Brexit. So maybe we shouldn't be too surprised that they're switching production of the Discovery model from Solihull to Slovakia, with inevitable job losses among their agency workers. JLR say it'll free up Solihull to make electric and hybrid vehicles. But Sarah Bishop asks if it's not just as much about Brexit.
The Land Rover Discovery, made in Solihull. Until now, that is. In future, the cars will be made at JLR's plant in Slovakia. The switch puts the jobs of hundreds of agency workers in the West Midlands at risk, a decision described as deeply concerning by one local MP.
JLR is a very important employer in our whole region, and for my constituency, 9,500 people are employed at the Solihull factory. But the important thing here is that JLR are pouring in hundreds of millions to adapt the Solihull factory so that we go on making those iconic brands like the Range Rover in the future.
JLR wants to invest millions of pounds in Solihull to make it the lead factory for building a new generation of electric and hybrid cars. To achieve that, Discovery production has had to be relocated. The West Midlands Mayor believes the decision is the right one.
Yes, of course there'll be regret that that model is going abroad, but underlying it they made a real clear commitment that Solihull is their lead factory. It will be where hundreds of millions of pounds are invested in modernising their production to take account of the vast changes going through the industry. So I think that's actually good news for the long term.
But not everyone's convinced. West Midlands UKIP MEP Bill Etheridge described it as a shameful decision, accusing JLR bosses of falling under the spell of the European Union. So is this decision a one-off? JLR say it's got nothing to do with Brexit, but the fact remains that Slovakia looks like a useful, indeed sensible Brexit insurance policy. A major factory outside the UK, but very much inside the EU.
Sarah Bishop, and it's not just JLR who Bill Etheridge blames for this decision. He talks about the government's weak leadership over diesel safety, Brexit and luxury car taxation. Let's ask the business minister what you would say to Bill Etheridge.
Well, what I'd say to Bill Etheridge is what I'd say to anybody, which is actually the UK car industry is doing incredibly well. JLR say themselves the reason they're moving the production is because they want to invest hundreds of millions of pounds in a new line, a new plant, and a new cars.
But it does look also like a hedge against Brexit. If we get the sort of bad deal, particularly on customs, that many people worry about, it would give them a bolt hole, and that would be bad news for Solihull, surely.
Well, it's not what JLR say, and it's not what Toyota say, who are investing £240 million in Burnaston in a new Auris line. It's not what Nissan say when they have two new lines that they're building in 2020 up in the northeast. It's not what Vauxhall are saying for their new plant in their new line in Luton. We are seeing huge investment in automotive industries here in the UK. That's because we've got great workforce and we've got great conditions for those businesses to thrive.
And the key issue in all this is the customs union. And I remember during the week at a CBI banquet in Birmingham, Paul Brexler, their president, talking about not a customs union, which is the Labour version of this, the customs union. Without British membership of the customs union, he says large sections of our motor industry will go extinct. What would you say to him?
So, I mean, 50,000 jobs in the region is reliant upon the automotive industry. I think there is caution here we've got to take. We can't just say, actually, just because there's going to be an investment by JLR in the Solihull plant on new models. For example, JLR is very much dependent on parts coming from different parts of Europe. So frictionless border is really, really important for goods and no delays, because actually without those, it can't produce its cars, and it will impact, no doubt, its business. So I think we need to watch very carefully. I don't think there's something to be optimistic about this. I think it is very concerning. The government isn't clear what customs union arrangement it would want. This region in particular is very much reliant on import and exports compared to most other areas.
Speaking in Birmingham at that CBI event, the president of the CBI was very worried about Britain's departure from the customs union. And what would you say to him? Because, you know, there is this fear, and Andy Street has written in the Times as well, about jobs being lost by the thousands as a result of leaving.
Through the modern industrial strategy, we're trying to support the automotive industry. We recognise it's a very complicated and complex supply chain. But the facts speak for themselves. Since 2010, employment in the automotive industry has gone up by 34% and investment has gone up by 33%. The car companies themselves recognise the value of being here.
Precisely because we're in the customs union.
Not at all. Precisely because we've got the workforce and we've got the innovation and the skills to deliver the best cars in the world. That's why they want to be here.
Are you an optimist or a pessimist? Because there was a great deal of pessimism about the motor industry at this CBI event the other evening.
I want to remain optimistic because this is about jobs, people's lives, the local economy, and it's really, really important that we absolutely keep an eye on what is going on in the automotive industry in this region.
And keep an eye on it, we will. For the moment, thank you very much again. Well, time now for our roundup of the rest of the political developments making the news here. 60 Seconds is brought to us today by Lindsay Doyle.
It's been a week for protests. On Monday, the Taxpayers Alliance took to the streets of Birmingham, calling for work to restart on the delayed Metropolitan Hospital in Smethwick. On Thursday, a former mayor of Shrewsbury was at the forefront of a campaign against proposals to increase parking charges in the town. Over in Wolverhampton, it was cab drivers who were revolting. They claimed that the council has damaged their trade by dishing out too many licences to minicab drivers.
They don't do a knowledge test, they don't do a driving test, the background checks I think a week. They're not professionals.
In calmer surroundings, the West Midlands Mayor, Andy Street, delivered his State of the Region message after 12 months in the job. He's given himself a modest 7.5 out of 10. And Lichfield MP Michael Fabricant says he might wear a grass skirt in the Commons after a DNA test revealed that he has Polynesian ancestry. After a turbulent week, I wonder what Mr. Speaker would make of that.
Well, Mr. Speaker Bercow is renowned, of course, for relaxing the dress code at Westminster, so this has to be the next logical step, doesn't it, Preet?
God help us is all I can say to that, goodness.
Well, shouldn't Mr. Fabricant be able to celebrate his Polynesian heritage in the House of Commons?
I think there's a certain type of attire I think even Mr. Speaker likes in the House.
But it would add a touch of diversity to the government benches, wouldn't it?
Michael is my neighbour, and I think the last thing he needs is something else to draw attention to himself. But, you know, as one blonde bombshell in the House is Polynesian, the other blonde bombshell, Boris, is from Turkey. It's quite a cosmopolitan parliament we have at the moment.
Well, it's also kind of almost surreal. We don't often have walkouts, and is this sort of midsummer madness, Brexititis taking hold?
Well, I think tempers are raised. You know, there's a lot at stake in Parliament at the moment, and we need to get this right. I think we all recognise that the decisions that we're making in Parliament at the moment are hugely important for the future of our country, and understandably tempers are raised because of that.
Is the mood at Westminster a bit sort of wound up and febrile, do you think? Briefly.
I think, yeah, absolutely, I think so, and I can definitely understand the SNP's position, because clearly not being able to participate, you know, and not having enough time allocated to some very important decisions that's going to affect the future of our country is absolutely really, really concerning, I have to say.
Well, a very interesting few weeks still to come, actually, before they break up. Again, my thanks to Preet Gill and Andrew Griffiths for joining us here today. Well, finally from me, there's yet another anniversary coming up this week. 70 years since the arrival of the Windrush generation from Jamaica aboard the Empire Windrush. An exhibition tomorrow at the Tally-Ho Conference Centre in Preet's Birmingham Edgbaston constituency is entitled Britain Called and We Answered, celebrating the tremendous contribution to our public services ever since. Interesting piece of timing too, isn't it? Our timing says this is where we all have to rejoin Sarah Smith.